Welcome back to the College Basketball Bracket Science YouTube channel, your encyclopedia for the college basketball season and beyond. It is Friday, February 13th, and Friday means we have a fun bracket stat for you. For those who don't know, over the past couple weeks, pretty much every Friday, we've been talking about a stat based on the numbers of some trends for filling out your bracket come Selection Sunday. We are just about a month shy of Selection Sunday, so these numbers are obviously going to change a little bit as all these tournaments or all these stats are based on the pre-tournament, after Selection Sunday, after, the conference tournaments all take place. So we're starting to really start diving into the discussion of who you might want to be taking. We've done national championship stuff. We've done, last week was a freshman-based one. Only 2 out of 21 teams who have won the national championship over the past 21 years have had a freshman leading their team in scoring. So we're talking about stuff like that. I'm not telling you how to fill out your bracket, but this is honestly my favorite stat that I do because it is a Sweet 16 one, and it is one that I actually believe in. We talk a bunch about KenPom. This is going to be based on a KenPom stat. So we are, let's dive right into it. Before we do, just be sure to hit that like button if you like stuff like this. Subscribe to the show. Like I said, we're doing this pretty much every Friday. We're also posting all this fun stuff on our Instagram at Bracket Science with 2 S's. So how this is going to look is I'm going to label the stat, and then I'm going to talk about the teams that have had this in common the past 4 seasons. We're going to talk about a trend, and then we're going to talk about the teams that, have this in common as well for this season and some notable teams that are left out. So the stat is 21 out of 25 teams. So 84% of teams over the past 4 seasons, so right after the COVID season, that have been inside the top 25 in both adjusted offensive and adjusted defensive efficiency have made at least the Sweet 16. So like I said, this is pre-tournament. This is via the KenPom algorithm that, rates adjusted offensive efficiency, adjusted defensive efficiency. This is, like I said, this is my favorite stat. It's one I've used for years. We're going to talk about the trend, but let's talk about how it's happened the past couple seasons. So starting in 2025 last season, all 4 of your Final Four teams were inside the top 25 in both offensive and defensive efficiency. All 4 1 seeds. Florida, your national champion. Houston, your runner-up. Duke and Auburn making the Final Four. Tennessee was also one of them that made the Elite 8. They were inside the top 25 in both. Remember, they had a really good offense with Chaz Lanier. Iowa State, I'm going to put a little asterisk on this one if you want, because they dealt with crazy injuries. Remember, Keyshawn Gilbert, who was probably their most important player last year, didn't play in March Madness. They lost in the round of 32 to Ole Miss. And then it's not a perfect stat. Clemson did lose to McNeese in the first round. However, I will say Clemson was like 24th in offense and like 20th in defense, as these other teams, at least on one side of the ball, were top 5-ish, top 10 on pretty much both sides of the ball. So Clemson was just barely snuck in, and they did get upset by McNeese in the first round. But the year before that, in 2024, UConn, who won the national championship, Purdue, who won the who was the runner-up, Houston and North Carolina both made it. Those were your other 2 1 seeds. Arizona, remember, was a top 4 team at KenPom going into it. They made the Sweet 16. Creighton and Marquette out of the Big East. Yes, remember, both of those teams were really good in 2024. And then there was one that didn't happen. It was Auburn, who lost to Yale. Not a ton of people saw that one coming, so that was a true upset. Remember, Chad Baker-Mazara got thrown out of that game in the first half, and they did not, they're bringing down the stat a little bit. More importantly, back in 2023, we had a perfect 5 of 5. UConn, who won the national championship. Texas that year with that Rodney Terry ended up taking over for Chris Beard. They were really good. Had Marcus Carr, made the Elite 8. Alabama, who was the number 1 overall seed. Houston, yet again, and you're going to see Houston in all 4 of these, and they will be in our bracket, or they will be in our graphic yet again as one of the teams inside the top 25 in both. And then UCLA. And then in 2022, we had 4 of 5. Houston, Gonzaga, Arizona, UCLA, and then Baylor, who did not, advance to the Sweet 16. Remember, they got beat by North Carolina when North Carolina went all the way to the national championship as an 8 seed. So this is what has happened in the past. So the trend I kind of want to label is, if there is a reason for someone to believe NIL and the transfer portal are making, the top teams even higher above the other teams, the teams with more money, This is a stat to show. 8 is the record for teams inside the top 25 in both. 7 is your next best, which was last season. And then 5 was actually your 3rd most that has happened. So it's continuing to be a trend upward. There's going to be even more than 8. We'll talk about it here in a second. We actually have 10 teams inside both of these. And this is based on, the transfer portal. This is based on NIL, but this is also based on coaches really diving into KenPom and using this. For those who don't know, like, coaches use KenPom. They, a coach is going to know if they're bad on defense, but they also, this is just a reflection. KenPom is a reflection to show exactly how bad you are on defense, what you can be better at, what you can be, how you can transform your offense, stuff like that. So coaches are really starting to buy into it. I don't know why a coach, a staff, a scout, anyone wouldn't use KenPom. It's just the numbers, and it's very, very realistic. And the trends are showing, like there's trends to win national championships, what you have to be inside in KenPom's offensive ratings and defensive ratings. There's also things like this where, you can kind of judge how to, how to pick your upsets and whatnot. So without further ado, let's talk about the teams that currently fit this criteria for 2026 March Madness. Now we have 10 of them. Like I said, this would be a record. The record is 8. Purdue is 3rd in offense, 22nd in defense. Michigan top 5 in both, 5th in offense, 1st in defense. Houston, like we said, just as steady as they come, 7th in both offense and defense. Arizona 8th in offense, 2nd in defense. Duke is 9th in offense, 3rd in defense. So we have 4 teams inside the top 10 in both. If you're looking for a Final Four, that this might be a good way to go. Vanderbilt, which was surprising to me, 13th in offense, 21st in defense. I didn't think their defense would be inside the top 25, but they are. They're 21st. Florida has been on a tear lately, 14th in offense, 5th in defense. Iowa State, 17th in offense, 6th in defense. UConn, who was actually in the 30s for a while in offensive efficiency, has climbed up to 20th and 8th in defense. And then Gonzaga barely there with the 25th ranked offense and 12th in defense. So these are 10 teams. So like we said, it's about 84% over the past 4 years have, been inside of these teams that are inside these specific parameters, have made the Sweet 16. You could even say, if you want to put an asterisk next to Iowa State's, I'm here for it, just with the injury problems that they had. Now, there's no saying some of these teams won't have injuries, but that's something to definitely consider as well. So let's talk about the teams that just missed out, though. So just some quick notable ones. Illinois is the 1st ranked offense in the country. However, they're 30th in defense. They can get there. And I'm not saying this means like you can't win the national championship. The past 3 national champions have been top 25 in both, but 4 years ago, that Kansas team was not top 25 in defensive efficiency going into that tournament. Or excuse me, was it offensive efficiency? I can't quite remember, but on one side of the ball, they weren't all the way there. Some other notable teams, Michigan State is actually 43rd in offensive efficiency with the 4th ranked defense. Kansas, again, 40th in defensive efficiency, 9th in defensive efficiency. So just on the outside. Nebraska, 36th ranked offense compared to 11th ranked defense. They're close. These next 2 teams are very close. Louisville and Texas Tech. Louisville's 12th in offense, 27th in defense. Texas Tech is 16th in offense and 26th in defense. So just one spot out. In fact, they were actually 25th on Thursday, and then some sort of result must have, changed their numbers a little bit. So they're now 26th in defensive efficiency. Alabama isn't quite close on the defensive side. Tennessee isn't close on the offensive side. Arkansas not close on the defensive side. Some other teams that could climb in. Virginia is close in offense. They're 30th compared to 17th in defense, so really close. Iowa and St. John's are also very close. They could jump into this graphic as well. So those are some notable teams that are left off of the list. Here are some teams that are on the list. Like I said, you got to fill up a Sweet 16 somehow. There's always going to be random things that happen. NC State was like not good all season long in pretty much offense or defense that a couple years ago where they made the Final Four. Anything can happen. There's upsets. However, we are starting to see a trend where there's a little bit more chalk going into March Madness, and these are the reasons. You're seeing a lot more teams in the top 10 in both. You're seeing a lot more teams in the top 25 on both sides of the ball. If a team has a bad offensive night, their defense can carry them. If you run into a hot shooting night, usually you can outshoot them because your offense is that good as well. Hopefully that makes sense. Hopefully everyone enjoyed this video. I know it's a little bit confusing to some, but it is a fun stat to look at. Like I said, we are going to update this specifically after Selection Sunday, once the field is already set and the numbers are all done. The Big Ten championship is on that Sunday and stuff like that. So be sure to come back after Selection Sunday week, as we will talk about prior to the tournament these individual stats. We'll talk national championship stats, of course, stuff like that with the updated numbers, because some teams are going to climb, some teams might drop. Be sure to like this video if you enjoy stuff like this. Like I said, pretty much every Friday we're going to do it. However, next Friday we're not going to. However, come back because we're going to do a live bracketology, pretty much Q&A, mailbag, whatever you want to call it, talking about how can your team become a 1 seed? Is there a path? Is there a path for this team? What does this team have to do to get out of the first four and, stuff like that. I'm going to be answering all kinds of questions off all the schedules pulled up. So be sure to come back for that on Friday and follow us on Instagram at Bracket Science with 2 S's, where we'll be talking about all this stuff. We will be back on Monday to recap the weekend. If you missed our weekend preview show, go ahead and go back and look at our video from Thursday as we talk bracketology as well. Everyone enjoy this weekend of hoops. Take care.